Here's a place where all of us can be safe. Our stories of transformation can be safe, and all the things we want to research are safe here. This is Safe Space with Cheyenne. I'm really excited you're here, and I hope you stick around for a while, because I've got a lot to show you before I leave Earth. I love you guys. Hi, friends. Welcome back. Today, I have a very special guest. His name is AJ Parr. He is a spiritual journalist specializing in near-death experiences. He's coming on today to not only talk about his book, Stairway to Heaven, 25 Near-Death Experiences with Encounters with God, Jesus, and Paradise, but he's also going to talk to us about how he got into his research today and any other questions that come along the way. I'm sure they will come out beautifully in conversation. So thank you for joining me today, AJ.
Thank you for inviting me to this safe space, and I'm really glad I'm here. Thank you for reaching out, and I think if you want, I can tell you how I got into all this,
Oh, I would love to. Just take it away.
Okay, well, basically, over 30 years ago, in 1991, I had been researching and I had been studying different religions. And one night, I do not really know if I stopped breathing or not. But one night, I found myself in this dark place in the middle of the night. I woke up. I could not even see my hands, put them in front of me, and it was completely dark. So I said, "Wait, this doesn't look like my room." So I had practiced lucid dreaming, and I knew how to wake up when I had a dream. So I said, maybe this is a nightmare. So I concentrated and woke up. I said, wow, what a strange dream. I did get afraid when I found myself in that complete darkness. I sort of imagined, or I thought, maybe there's someone in that darkness. I was afraid. Just like when you're a kid and you're told to go to a dark room, you start imagining things in the dark room. Well, that's more or less what happened. So the following night, it happened again. I found myself in this dark place. And this time, at once I said, wait, I think I feel someone there. I got really scared. And I concentrated again, and I managed to wake up. So it was a dream, but I didn't know what was really happening. So the following day, for the third time in a row, I woke up at 3 a.m. and I found myself in this dark place. In near-death experiencers call it the void. We can talk about that later. But this time, I felt this presence even stronger. I knew I was not alone. And this was confirmed when I heard a voice. The voice told me, surrender, all is one. When I was 17 years old, I had a oneness experience during meditation. And I knew after reading spiritual books and all that the idea that all is one is considered in different religions. And in my experience, I felt one with nature. So I decided to trust this voice. I quickly thought and concluded, if all is one, then the person who's talking to me must be me. Okay? This was really strange, but I got that conclusion immediately. So I relaxed, and the feeling in my chest, when you're afraid, you feel in your chest like an emptiness or something, It's more or less similar to the sensation you get when you're falling, or when you're in the car and you go over a bump. You feel something in your chest expanding. So all of a sudden, this continued to expand. And I said, wait a minute, what I was feeling was not necessarily fear, because it continued to expand and expand and expand and expand. And it grew larger than me, larger than my house, larger than everything. And I simply expanded, expanded, expanded. And I am not aware of the explosion, but I turned into light. It was like, suddenly I found myself in another dimension. Why do I say it's another dimension? Because unlike this 3D world in which you can only look forward or backward, I could see forward and backward at the same time. And I could also see to the right, to the left, in all directions at the same time. Obviously, I had no body, because if I could look up and down, there was nothing in between. And it was like being in the middle of a super bright star, gigantic, and each ray extended infinitely in all directions. So when I was there, I had no uh, recollection of being human. I had no thoughts. I was there, and I could see not only the center of the light where my heart was, or what I think my heart was. I could also see each ray of light and the empty space surrounding each ray of light. So I felt I was in a place, or this light was at the same time, it was full, the place was full of light, but it was also full of emptiness. So this was like a contradictory feeling. I was also swept away by the sensation of being everything. And the sound was more or less like, was something like, I don't know, I cannot really reproduce it, but it was, I could compare it either to a strong wind or a thunderstorm, or maybe a train passing by really close. It was really strong. But when I was there, I I realized that that I was all alone. Basically, since I was everything, there was nothing else. So I don't know how long I stayed there, but all of a sudden, I found myself in my bed with this memory of what just had happened. And I said, "Wow, what happened? I can't believe what happened." It was still so fresh in my mind that I still felt that I had this. That my shape was not my body. I felt that I was still like a sphere, because that's the sensation I had when I was there. That I was like a star, but since each ray of light expanded in all directions at the same time, the shape was more or less like a sphere with a center in it, and projecting the light was projected in all directions. So when I woke up, I still felt that I was the center, and that I projected myself in all directions. So I felt that I was one with everything. So I was really shocked. And since I am a journalist and I'm always been curious, I got up and I did like a little experiment. I got up and I pressed my hand against the wall, and I was the wall. I was the hand pressing against the wall, but I was also the wall pressing back against the hand. So I had this like a double consciousness. I was aware that I was everything, and this lasted for 2 or 3 days. And in the meantime, I had a revelation that um, really explained to me what had just happened. However, this took years for me to understand. But I'll tell you about the download. It was like a small poem with a few lines explaining what reality is and explaining basically the creation of the universe. So this poem went like this, more or less. In the beginning was the One, but the One was alone and he wanted to play. So he divided himself in two and gave number two amnesia, and thus the game began. That was it. So I wrote it down immediately and I understood the explanation. And I found many scriptures that more or less talk about this. The Hindus call it Leela, the game of life. Okay, God, in the beginning, there was God. Okay. So, in order to create multiplicity, since he was one in this non dual universe, which is all light, all love, all wisdom, that was another thing. I felt when I was there that I had no need for questions. I knew it all. But more than answers, I simply had no need for questions. So basically, my interpretation is the following. The beginning, okay, it was oneness. And in order to give birth to this dual world, because duality is present even in every atom, we have positive and negative energies. Everything in this world is dualistic. We have male and female, we have good and bad, we have all these polarities that do not exist in the world of oneness, okay? The non dual universe. So, in order to create this dual world, God, according to to my download, divided himself and made himself forget who he was. So we are really gods. Everything is matter, everything. But we have forgotten that we are God. And humans, the spiritual journey consists in remembering who we are and going back home. That's why many people who have near death experiences say they feel they are back home, because in um, in that place where they go, there is less duality, and they are more. They feel that they are more blended in with God than humans. Angels hardly have an individual consciousness. Based on what I've read, they act like collective souls. And we also have like a soul family. We have a lot of people who have had near death experiences talk about soul families that they incarnate together. So, and Carl Jung talks about the uh, collective consciousness or collective unconscious. So we do have like a collective unconsciousness or consciousness that unites us all. And if you go even further, there is only one consciousness in the universe. We call it God. You can call it universal energy. You can call it the creator. You can call it source, spirit. It has no name. That's another thing I understood when I came back, that names don't matter. I mean, the name we give to things is only like a metaphor. Uh, if you're drinking water, it doesn't matter if you call it water or not. The taste, the sensation, what you feel when you swallow it, that has there is no way to describe that. You know, you smell a flower, there is no way to describe that. You can only say it smelled beautiful, and someone else who has also smelled the flower may more or less understand. But someone who has never smelled a flower cannot imagine it. Just like you cannot explain to someone else what chocolate tastes like if they have never tried chocolate. So I understood that words are imperfect. And a lot of people who have had these experiences, there's a psychologist, William James, in the late 1800s, being at the early 1900s, he talked about ineffability. So that's the word they created to express when something cannot be explained or described. You say it's ineffable. Okay, so God is ineffable, and I started doing like heavy research after that. I found that many mystics in all religions use that same word, ineffability, ineffable. So it, there is no way to describe God, and the description of God as an old man in the clouds, or as any, or as more or less human, was created by people. Uh, it's not. We always tend to represent things like Mother Nature. Yeah, okay, Mother Nature, but she's she's way more than Mother Nature. She is nature. And what is nature? Well, it's abstract, it's a force. I would say that nature and life, love, light is the same. God, who is God? Mother Nature. So we tend to give names to things, and create a confusion. Why? Because most people think that their religion, their God, is the only God. So if I'm Christian, I say my God is the only God. If I'm a Jew, I'll say, no, 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 Christians are wrong. My God is the only one. And so do the rest of the religions. The Hindus have thousands of gods. And the Buddhists don't believe in God, but they do believe in the universal emptiness. They do believe in that space that I think I reached. So after that, I was really confused because I could not put it in words. However, those first days, I really got excited. And I said, wow, I'm going to write a book, because I had been reading different, spiritual books. I was reading Carlos Castaneda, The Teachings of Don Juan, and some other books. So I said, nah, I'm going to write a book about this. But when I started writing down everything, I felt from my heart a question. It was, I didn't come up with the question, and I didn't come up with the answer. It simply came out. I was writing and I was thinking, wow, I'm going to write this book. And then I heard this question came out from my heart, and I said, why? And as I was hearing why, the answer came out from my heart too, because I want to write a book and be famous. And hearing my reply, I said, no, wrong answer. I felt like, I felt that I had completely failed. And I got really embarrassed, because I felt that that was God, or, my higher self, or whatever you want to call it. So I fell down in my knees and I said, no, no, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I'm not going to write a book. And to this day, I've never written a book about my experience. I started telling my experience around 2 years ago after I met Dr. Yvonne Kaysen. She is a near death experience researcher, and she coined the term spiritually transformative experiences, STEs. She was the first Canadian doctor to uh, research these phenomena, and thanks to her, this terminology, spiritually transformative experiences, has been adapted by many organizations. So I interviewed her once, and after the interview ended, she asked me, have you ever had a spiritually transformative experience? I had never heard that term. So I said, you mean a spiritual experience? Yeah, wow, I did. But I've never told anyone. And she said, no, you can tell me. So we set up a meeting in private. And she was there with Ana Cecilia Gonzalez, who is also a near death experiencer. Dr. Yvonne Kaysen has had 5 near death experiences, and Ana Cecilia Gonzalez has had 1 and possibly 2, because she still doesn't know if it was only an out of body experience or not. So I told my story to them, and I started going to the sharing circles. I started meeting people. I had already started with my podcast, interviewing people with near death experiences. So after I decided not to tell anyone, back 30 years ago, I started. It was strange because, for example, identify, I was able to identify if I took the Gospels, could identify the parts where Jesus was talking about that experience, and the parts that were. I also studied the origin of the Gospels. They were written like 40 years after Jesus died, but there was an original text, or there were several original texts, and yes, they people added things, and it was uh, communicated by word of mouth, and people added things. So, but the basic teaching is there, hidden, more or less hidden. So uh, I started researching other religions too, and I found that they all talk about the light. For example, one of the commonalities, I really got into comparative religion study for 30 years, and I found that all religions talk about the light. All religions talk about conditional love. All religions talk about the need to either wake up or enlighten ourselves, or they talk about how this world is an illusion. The Hindus call it Maya. Jesus said, do not gather your treasures in this world, gather them in the other world. So he also talked about another reality. And a lot of people say that we are souls having a physical experience. So I believe that's true. So slowly I started finding coincidences in the teachings. There are many phrases that Jesus and Buddha said that are more or less the same. And the golden rule: don't do to others what you would not like others to do to you. That is also present in basically all religions. So around 10 years ago or 11 years ago, I decided to start writing, but not about my story, but about these coincidences. So I wrote over 20 books on different religions, always talking about the commonalities. So I studied, for example, Buddhism, Zen Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, Hinduism. I studied the early Christians and found out that in the beginning, when Jesus was alive and shortly after he died, they had no temples, they had no priests or pastor, they didn't have bishops, they didn't have anything like that. They met in open fields, usually in a lake or a mountain, and they talked about the kingdom of heaven. Now, the kingdom of heaven is also what near death experiences are all about. So I continued reading and I found out that there's a part of the there's a part of the Gospels in Matthew. The apostles ask Jesus, Master, why do you speak to people in parables? And he said this. I'm gonna read it because I have it here. It's Matthew 13. He says, because the knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven has been given to you, but not to them. This is why I speak to them in parables, because even if they see, they perceive nothing, and even if they listen, they hear nothing, and therefore understand nothing. So this means something. What does this mean? He had two teachings. He had a public teaching for the crowds, which mystics call exoteric teaching, the exterior teachings. And he also had a private teaching for his disciples, which is called esoteric teaching. So I'm going to repeat it. The apostles asked Jesus, why do you speak to the people in parable? Because the knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven has been given to you, but not to them. So this is a proof. This proves that the teaching we find in the Gospels is the one meant for the masses. What does this mean? That there is a hidden teaching also found in the Gospel, which talks about the knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven. So I said, wow, I'm going to find what this teaching is. And I reached the conclusion that Jesus taught meditation or contemplation. He talked about the light in your eye. He talked about having to be born again. He talked about many things that near-death experiencers mentioned. But back then, I had no knowledge of near-death experiences when I did this study. So after writing around 20 books, I met a journalist. We started working together, and she had had a near-death experience. So one day we were talking, and I told her, look, your experience is great. I had an experience too, but I don't know how to define it. And I told her my experience of merging with the light, finding myself in the void. And she said, wow, I had the same thing when I had my near-death experience. I felt the same thing. I was also in the void. I was also in the light. I also had 360-degree vision. I could see in all directions at the same time. I felt that I was always one. And I said, wow, I didn't know about near-death experiences. This was like around 4 years ago. So it took me a while to start seriously researching. And finally, I decided to start interviewing people, because it's not the same if you watch a YouTube video, or if you start gathering testimonies from books and from videos, it's not the same as actually being able to speak to these people. So I decided to interview people, and I did find not all of them. Some of them had the experience of the void. Some of them, or most of them, had experiences with the light. Most of them, or a lot of them, had heard voices, the voice. So there were many elements. So I ended up saying or wondering if I died or not during my sleep. I was later diagnosed with sleep apnea. So, and I remember when I came back, I sighed. I went, oh, when I came back to the body, I took a deep breath, and but I cannot seriously say that that's what happened. I don't know. That's why I call it a near-death like experience, which also exists. I've interviewed people who have had near-death like experiences, and I've also talked to researchers, and they say that yes, you do not have to actually die in order to have an NDE. So I started interviewing people, and I found a series of commonalities. I had read Rick Moody, who found 15 commonalities, and I also read about the commonalities pointed out by Jeffrey Long, Bruce Grayson, and Melvin Morse, mostly. And I decided to focus only on heavenly NDEs, and I found 9 commonalities. Now, these commonalities, for example, going through a tunnel, that's not a heavenly common element. That's it's Going through a tunnel does not involve anything spiritual, but meeting the light does. Okay, and somehow, like hearing a voice is also a commonality. Having a life review. These are things that happen to people when they go to heaven. Meeting God, meeting Jesus, or angels, light beings, is another commonality. Uh, Given the choice to return, and being given a mission, you have to go back and tell the people that death is not the end. That's something that I found among many people. So I made a list of 9 commonalities, and I wrote this book, Stairway to Heaven, which I released last year. And it has been very popular, because for the first time, someone defined these 9 commonalities. And right now, I am working on another book on children's NDEs, which also is fascinating because I also found that non-Christians, instead of seeing Jesus or angels or light beings, well, they do see light beings and all that, but some of them see Babaji, or they've seen Buddha, or they've seen Krishna, and people in Islam, uh, they see Muhammad, and so each religion represents their deities their own way. However, I wanted to focus only on Christian NDEs in this first book. So one of the conclusions was that depending on our culture, we will see what we see. Okay, depending on our culture, we will see Jesus or not. However, I started studying near-death experiences in children and I became friends with Dr. Melvin Morse, who was the first person to interview or to write a scientific paper on children's NDEs. And these kids, they can be, and I also interviewed PMH Atwater, who also did an extensive research. And there are kids around 2 years old that also say they saw Jesus, they saw angels. Of course, when I interviewed them, or when Melvin Morse interviewed them, or PMH after, they were no longer 2 years old, you know. But a lot of these kids, when they grow up and tell their story, they mention certain elements of heaven that are included in these nine commonalities. I It was hard to find someone who was very young and had a life review. But I did find one. It was Jacob Cooper. When he was 4 years old, he suffocated and he had a life review. And he not only remembered, went over his present life, but he also relived a past life in which he had committed suicide. And they were giving him, he understood that they had given him like another opportunity in this life. And when he heard that, he was no longer, I mean, he had the body of a 4-year-old, but his consciousness was that of an adult, you know? So it's really strange. There are really strange things. For example, this is a near-death experience that I read about in Jeffrey Long's Near-Death Experience Research Foundation. It's about a kid who went with his father out for dinner. They crashed their car, and both of them were taken to the hospital. So this kid had a near-death experience. He found himself in heaven, and he was greeted by Jesus, and he felt great. He hugged Jesus, and he told him he wanted to stay there with him forever. And Jesus looked at him and said, "No, you cannot. You cannot stay with me now." And the kid said, "But why?" "Well, that's an arrangement I made with someone you know. Come on in." And then the kid's father walked in, and he said, "Yeah, son, Jesus and I made an agreement, reached an agreement. You're going back, but I have to stay here." "Why, Dad?" "Well, you have to go back and take care of your mother, but it's my time. I have to stay here." And the kid said, "No," and he woke up. When he woke up, someone came to his bed. He was in the hospital, and they told him his father had died. And he said, "Yeah, I know. He already told me." So, these are cases that are really wild.
You've said so much in such a short time span. I'm like trying to bookmark all of my questions that I have for you. But one of the biggest ones that I have, especially being a near-death researcher and having your own experience, is what do you think near-death experiences help or don't help in shaping our reality and how we even view our consciousness these days?
Well, I think that near-death experiences not only shape our reality, but together with mystical experiences and mystical dreams, they are the origin of the world's first religious or spiritual paths. I believe that in the beginning, when we were prehistoric men and we had like small tribes, anthropologists know that humans in the beginning, they had small communities, maybe 40, 50 humans, and more or less like the native tribes today, they had a shaman or a witch doctor, the wise man, usually a very old man who could speak with the other side. And I think these guys were chosen because they had had near-death experiences. or some kind of mystical experience that differentiated them from the rest. I believe that meeting these light beings that we call Jesus, who of course existed in prehistoric times. It's not true that Jesus was born 2,000 years ago. Maybe physically, he was born physically, but the light being that he truly is and the light being that we truly are has always existed. So these prehistoric men, let's say a hunter was chasing a mammoth, fell, hit his head, and died briefly, had a near death experience, and came back. He came back with certain knowledge, and sometimes they develop powers, healing powers,
Mhm.
telepathy. Some of them can foresee the future. They tend to be more introverted. They tend to not chase power and riches. They tend to be, this word is not to be taken literally, but they tend to be more Christians, even in prehistoric times. What do I mean by Christians? Well, they follow the golden rule: don't do to others what you don't want others to do to you. They knew that they were all, that you are me, that I am you, and that we are all brothers and sisters, and that we are really one soul. So they also knew that words are the creator of the illusion. There is no good and bad. Why do we say killing someone is bad? If you go to war and kill someone to defend your country, is that bad? No, they give you a medal or they give you a reward for going out and killing the enemy. So is killing good or bad? It is all a point of view. In prehistoric times, it was normal. I mean, another tribe came to invade my tribe, and let's kill each other and see who survives. Humans, I cannot prove it, but the humans that survived in the early days, most of them had to kill others in order to survive.
Mhm.
Okay, so it was sort of normal. So these witch doctors, they know that there is a superficial life in which you believe in. For example, I'm having this problem, or my father died, or my husband died, and the witch doctor knows better, or this shaman, they know better. They know that even death is an illusion, because people, when they die, they actually continue living. So it's not true that people die. Uh, so uh, what I found after researching around 100 near-death experiencers, is that they know that life goes on, death does not exist. We are one with God. Time is an illusion. And what we call the materialistic world is also an illusion. I mean, we are not here to become rich. We are not here to seek power. We are here to grow spiritually. Basically, that's the main reason.
Everything you say, I just want to nod because it's along the lines of a lot of the things that I've researched as well. I told you that I got to start reading your book when you sent it to me, and there were a lot of commonalities that stuck out to me just through Dolores Cannon's work of Encounters with Jesus, which would be the follow-up to Jesus and the Essenes. And the commonalities that you've pointed out between the white light, the life review, the all-encompassing love. I think I pulled it. It said an immense, intelligent, loving force. And even on one of the NDEs, the guy knew that this majestic, mystical being in front of him was shining brighter than the angels or white lights that were around him. So he asked him, "Who are you?" And he said, "I am the one that you call Lord." And immediately he loved that he didn't know who he was, in a way. Like, he didn't just come up and go, "I'm Jesus Christ, I'm your Lord and Savior." Like, he had to ask who he was, and then he revealed himself. And those moments right there, just so powerful. When I read NDEs like that, NDEs about meeting God, talking to God, seeing relatives on the other side. There was another one where a lady had a friend that passed away, and she was still in the gown that she was in when she had passed. And she said, "What are you doing here?" Like, shocked and a little upset. And she's like, "I don't know." And she's like, "You're not supposed to be here. I'm here waiting on my mother." And that gave me another thought of, like, you said dimensions. I like to say dimensions and densities. And I thought about maybe the densities of heaven, where there's the inner core where the light body and being and God is omnipresent. He can go and see anything and all things. But then when that woman said, "I'm here waiting for my mother," I was wondering what density of heaven she was waiting for, or how she might have known her mom was getting ready to cross over, because she wasn't on the inner part of heaven, which is where you hear people reporting so much about seeing God. Like, God sometimes meets them at somewhat of a gateway, which I think is a portal entrance, since they all come in from a tunnel. But that one really sparked some curiosity in me, when a lot of them are like, "What are you doing here? You're not supposed to be here. Go back." But when that one was like, "I'm here waiting for my mom. You're not supposed to be here," that unraveled so many other questions of just the expansion of heaven, and where so many different people have these experiences, and where they're actually all going to report these different scenes.
Yeah, well, one of the commonalities I mentioned in my book is the what I what two of the people I interviewed called the lobby of heaven.
Mm-hmm.
Raymond Moody talks about the limit. There's always a limit that people who have near-death experiences cannot cross. They are told, if you cross this line, you will not be able to come back. If you decide that you're not coming back, you can go in, whatever. It may be a gateway, or it may be an entrance, but simply they have a limit. And two of the people I interviewed called it the lobby of heaven. And they mentioned that it's the lobby of heaven because when they're there, you can see dead relatives waiting for you on the other side. One of them may come towards you, but you can tell that there's another part where they can go and you cannot. So I find that really interesting. I also mentioned in the last part of the book, I mentioned that my mother, before she died, she was 2 years in coma. She never regained consciousness, and she died. But while she was in coma, one night, I woke up in the middle of the night again, and I saw my mother standing next to me. I always thought it was a dream. Could have been a dream. But I saw my mother and I said, "Mother, what are you doing here?" She said, "No, no, they let me come." "Who let you come?" "The angels." "What do you mean?" I asked her. "Well, I'm in a place between life and death. It's more like it's more or less like the dream world mixed with the spiritual world, but there is a group of angels taking care of me, and they say I am not allowed to cross over to the world of the dead because my body is still in coma. But I am fine here. I wanted to tell you that I'm okay, that I like it here, that they're taking great care of me." And she also told me, "You can come visit me if you want." And I said, "But how?" Well, she told me something like, I would need to develop my astral body, and she gave me some instructions, but I never managed to do it. And she died shortly after. The night she died, uh, around 2 or 3 in the morning, I was working on my computer. I felt a presence behind me, and I turned around. There was no one there, and then I felt it again. And I turned around and I asked, "Mother?" And the following morning, when I woke up, I was told that she had died. So that was like a after death experience or communication that I had. And it also, I mentioned in the book that it was also like an explanation of what happens to near death experiencers. They reach this place which is between life and death, and they are not allowed to cross over, just like what happened to my mother. Back then I had no idea of near death experiences, and I remember the dream while I was writing the book. This was a dream I had like over 20 years ago, and I have forgotten completely about it. But when I remembered it and said, "Wow, that explains it," and that's why I decided to include it in the book.
That's a beautiful story. It
Yeah.
reminds me, so I had a friend whose mom passed away really suddenly too. And obviously the family took it hard because it's the mother and she's the matriarch of the family. But it was on New Year's Eve, she called everybody and did her "I love you, you're my babies," paraphrasing, of course. And then when they woke up the next day, she was gone. And my friend obviously struggled with the death of his mother, but she started visiting him in his dreams very, very often, like not far from the funeral or anything like that. And he would call me because I'm the friend that you call when you have any experience. I usually answer my phone. Whoever's on the other line is like, "You're the only one that I could tell this to that's not going to think I'm crazy."
Okay.
Or, you could probably help me interpret this because, like you, I'm a very big religious commonality researcher, but I will also study anything that I can and try to get into it. And if it's a part of my path, it sticks. And if it doesn't, it'll eventually waft off of me. And dream interpretations have been something that I've done on and off just from, like, I would say, an intuitive point. And he had known all of the afterlife research that I had done and just how I absolutely love researching stuff about heaven. So he called me and he's like, "I want to describe this dream to you. My mom's trying to talk to me. I'm struggling with communicating with her. So can you just kind of help me out on what's going on?" So for a couple weeks, every couple weeks, she would come visit. And, they're pretty straightforward. Like, she was trying to tell him, like, "I'm sorry, it was sudden. I'm happy over here. I'm fine. Everything's fine." But the gist of it was she knew that she had left suddenly, even though they felt like her work wasn't done. I'm sure soul contract wise, just to keep it very compassionate for the family. I feel like maybe from a soul contract standpoint, she had done all that she needed to do. And maybe her presence would have been impacted more if she had left that way. It's kind of what I was getting from all the information. So I said, she's obviously crossed over. She's not in like some weird limbo that she needs to be broken out of. I'm like, but she's not going to fully move on into what she needs to go to in her afterlife until her babies are taken care of. I said, that is God's love right there. That is how powerful love is. And he was like, "Okay." And I'm like, "So, like, what guilt are you having? Like, what didn't you tell your mother?" I'm like, "Because you can tell her right now." Like, it's weird to think that since they're not physically in front of you, that you can't talk to her. I was like, "But you definitely can." So a couple weeks went by. Family was still obviously in mourning, and he called me and he goes, "Okay." She came back to me in my dream, and this time he painted this beautiful place where there was basically, it was like nature, heavenly. You can't describe the colors, they're just better than they are on earth. The trees, everything's beautiful, but there's this bridge that she's standing next to. And she was letting him know, like, "Hey, look, this is where I am now. Like, I'm happy. I'm not in pain. I'm peaceful. you need to move on with your life. You have to raise your family. You have to look after the girls, you know, all of this stuff. She goes, but I'm not going to be visiting you like this anymore. You have to let me go and I have to let you go. It doesn't mean that we're not going to be together. It doesn't mean that you can't access me when you want. But as far as me, like she was letting him know, when I walk across this bridge, that consciousness is dissolving and I am going back to God. And again, that's my interpretation of what she's showing him and trying to tell him. So he watches her walk across this bridge and she's waving goodbye the whole time. And when she gets on the other side of the bridge, she disappears. And from what I know, she hasn't visited him in his dreams since then, because she wanted to make sure she was there for her family, for her sudden passing. And she was able to do that from this outer area, even though she was able to cross that threshold. I believe she's the type of woman that met God and she goes, let me go back and talk to my kids. When my kids are good, then I'll come be with you. And she was like a devout woman of God, very educated, just one of those people that when they pass, you're like, why'd you take a good one? You know, like it's just one of those really good people. So the impact that that death has had on their family, obviously, there's positive and negatives to it. They're definitely a stronger family unit from it, but I'll never forget just the images that I had in my mind as he's telling me about this dream of his mother showing him all of these things. And he's a very logical, like grounded masculine, you know, like it's really hard for him to get into that type of rhetoric. So I felt honored that he was able to reach out to me and ask me about this, but the openness that he had after that experience, I think is something that his mother also wanted him to have.
Great. Yeah, I'm sure that's a true story. And I agree with what you told him.
I think it's beautiful.
Usually there is a river or a bridge or something you need to cross, or dead people need to cross in order to, pass to the other side.
Like dissolve that cord, like really let it all go.
Right.
I love that you did bring up reincarnation for a moment and past lives. It was just quick, but did you believe in past lives or reincarnation before you had any type of experience? I know that you said you grew up Catholic, so they definitely just believe you have one shot. So do you believe in reincarnation because of near-death experiences, or are you still on the fence about it? Where do you
So I started believing in reincarnation way before, when I started studying the origins of the Catholic faith and how the Roman Empire created the Catholic institution.
Mm-hmm.
Around 300 years after Jesus died. The Emperor Constantine created an institution called the Catholic Church. And one of the things they did was the big decision when they created the church. They had this council, and there were two versions of the story of Jesus. One of them that was that he was a man, a very holy man, and the other one was that he was the Son of God, and he decided it was best for the Roman Empire to proclaim that he was the Son of God, something like Apollo, or like the Roman deities. So when they decided that, they actually went after all the Christians that said that Jesus was a man, like Buddha or like Krishna, and they also eliminated the concept of reincarnation, which existed in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
See, in the Bible, there's a part of the Bible in which the apostles asked him if he was the Messiah, and they tell him, "Are you the Messiah?" And he says, "Yes." And they say, "But wasn't Elijah, one of the prophets, supposed to come back before before the Messiah came? And he said, yeah. And he did come back. He was John the Baptist.
Mm-hmm.
So that's in the Bible still today. They could not eliminate that part. They give it different interpretations. So there were several councils organized by the Roman Empire, and the Roman Catholic Church. It had a lot of power in Rome, and afterwards, even through the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, it was the highest power on earth. So they had in the beginning several councils in which they actually banned any mention of reincarnation, and they destroyed a lot of books. And so I did know. I always felt that it's absurd to have one life. You make one mistake, and then you're going to spend the rest of your, eternity in
Yeah,
hell.
you're burning in hell.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's absurd. And the most absurd thing is, if God is all powerful, then why would He create us if we're going to make a mistake and go to hell? I mean, that was like, it would mean that God is really cruel.
Yeah,
So, no.
fear-based God that a lot of religions
Yeah, right.
I
So
don't fit well with either.
I around 17, 18, I broke up with my Catholic religion, and I started reading about different religions. And I knew back then, they call it New Age. You believe people who have a more holistic approach,
Mhm.
and they accept the good things about Christianity because it has great things. But or a lot of people recognize that the Christ within is what Jesus called, what Hinduists call the Atman, or the soul within, the Krishna presence, they call it in Hinduism. And Buddhists talk about also the Buddha essence. So, like I said before, this has no name.
Mm-hmm.
So God is within us. They say God is within us because we are also God. Okay, but God is like the ocean, and we are only like drops of water.
Mm-hmm.
So, are the drops of water the same as the ocean? Yeah, you could say.
It might get a little dirty.
Right. But
Wash right out.
when they go back to the ocean,
Yeah.
disappears. So yes, and what you were saying, what you told your friend when your mother said goodbye, yeah. People say, yeah, when you die, you go to heaven, you go back to God.
Yes.
Yeah. But I believe there is a heaven where these souls stay, like Dolores Cannon explains. You will find your deceased relatives, and you will reincarnate together with your soul group. That is your father, your mother, your sister, your brother, your friends, your close, the closest people you have in life. They usually, it is said, this I cannot prove, that they reincarnate together, and then perhaps your mother will be in your future life your daughter, and your father will be your son, and your husband will be your grandfather. I don't know.
It's so hard. I remember getting into this research in the beginning, and I definitely had a very, very logical brain. So like when I was trying, obviously I was revealing my supreme attachment to my father, to my mother, to my siblings, and to my identity just in this life with them. So I realized that programming was still really thick in my subconscious when I started going through it, because I wasn't able to see the full picture of the oversoul and the soul evolution and, all of these concepts that I'm very familiar with now. But from like, if there's a beginner listening right now and they're like, what do you mean my dad could be my son or my mom could be my wife? And I'm like, yes, I've been there. I understand where you're coming from with thinking it's complete poppycock, because we all have our roles and our, karma to play out, so to speak. But I'm extremely comfortable with it now. And I'm even more excited about it now that I am, because not just thinking about, oh, I get to live with these people on past this identity that I've been given in this life. But I also wondered like, oh, well, I wonder what my past lives are like, because I'm so in love with all of the family and the friends that I have in this life. But if I applied the love that I have now and put it on my past life, I would have felt the exact same. And maybe I didn't know in that past life, but that's what
Yeah.
in my mind, it's made me feel better about the experience. Cause I know in any spiritual emergency or any awakening that somebody has, you can go so deep into research that you can honestly get like a nihilistic perspective on life, where you're just like, it's meaningless. None of this matters. I was just told by an angel, this is all an illusion. Like, why am I paying taxes? Why am I putting up with this bullshit? And it gives you almost like a rebellious stance on life, where you're like, no, I don't want to climb a corporate ladder. No, I don't want to go do this bullshit. Like, I guess I'm saying it is more of like a warning. If you do have any of those experiences, is there really is meaning behind life. It's just you putting yourself in the driver's seat of it and realizing what your unconscious patterns are. I don't think everybody is going to wake up in this lifetime not in the way that people are talking about as far as new earth and 3D and 5D ascensions and all of that. But I do think it's extremely important that no matter what you research, that you understand that there's a meaning behind everything that you do. You just don't have that perspective or that vantage point at the time. And I bring that up because there's an excerpt from your book that I wanted to pull up. I am going to say right now, this is my favorite story from the book because I haven't read all of the other ones. But on page 88, there's a woman by the name of Mary who talks about going and meeting God. And she goes through a life review. And my favorite thing about the beginning of her life review is she's talking about all of the things that God showed her that she did good that she didn't even know that she did, which I thought was really, really powerful, because there are people day in and day out doing good things, whether they realize it or not, and they don't understand the impact that they've done on those other people. So them being able to feel and see what just their presence alone, maybe just smiling at somebody at a store, like actually seeing somebody could have really done for them. So I wanted to point that out because I think it's extremely important that we are all kind to each other the best we can, but also realizing that good deeds happen without us even realizing it all the time. She gets into obviously the more like shameful parts of it, is what you would call. And this is the thing that I want to bring up the most, because I know in Christianity, we talk about the fearful aspect of God, and on Judgment Day, you'll stand before him and you will be judged. And in here, she says, I had to see and feel all the hurtful things I had done, even the hurtful things I didn't know I did. I had to feel the person's hurt I caused. But you know how we are taught that we will stand before God and be judged one day. God was not judging me. I was looking at my actions with God at my side, loving me while I was judging myself. Shit blew my mind. I read it like 3 times before I could finish the paragraph. And she said, and believe me, no one could judge me any harsher than I already judged myself. It was like getting caught by my parents when I was doing something wrong. She was ashamed and there was no hiding. She immediately decided afterwards, after seeing the hurtful things that she had done, God still not judging her, she was just like, oh, I belong in hell. I don't deserve heaven. Just take me to hell. And God said, wait a minute, young lady, you get back here. You don't understand. I'm going to explain this to you. He talks kind of parentally, like, what different choices could you have made? He wasn't yelling, how could you do that? You're going to hell. He was just like, let's really pull this apart and think about how we could have acted different. Then my favorite part was, the hardest part of this was realizing he had already forgiven me. I was having a very hard time forgiving myself. He showed me how I couldn't let his love in without forgiving myself first. Punishing myself didn't make me better in his eyes. Accepting his love was what he wanted from me. Powerful NDE experience right there. And again, so many commonalities from a lot of the other people that I have listened to and strive to interview. But when you read a story like that, especially as a human, you still struggle with forgiving yourself with certain parts of your life that you know you need to let go of, but somewhere there's a string stuck in your subconscious that just wants to be seen and identified. But the punishing of yourself, being like, oh no, Lord, I'll do it for you, that was really powerful, because I know a lot of people get trapped in that mindset of punishing themselves and like doing God's job. The idea that you're judging yourself as you look through your life review, but God is standing next to you and he's like, okay, like we're going to talk about this. It's extremely powerful, because I think that is what should be taught. I think there's so much conditional love and fear-based aspects taught on earth these days that are making people live in such a fear state that they're not even experiencing the world that they came to experience. There's a lot of obstacles along the way. There's a lot of distractions. I always like to say we're Pinocchio trying to go to school. We have Jiminy over here that's like, be good, do good. That's your intuition and your consciousness. And then your ego comes up and it's like, I don't want to go to school. I want to go to an amusement park and I don't want to do this. Like, we're all little Pinocchios running around no matter what age we are. But when you get to the inevitable end of this life, the end of my identity as Cheyenne on this earth, I love knowing that when I go there, that the fear-based God that I was taught about when I was younger isn't who I'm going to meet. The all-encompassing love, the unconditional, no strings attached love that I think we all want in this life and all want to be in this life, but there's errors in the way of that as well. That is what makes me even more excited to live my life. Because I definitely had a dark period of my life where I was like, what is going on? What is this for? Take me back. Like, no, ew, get me out of here, And now through this research, which is why I asked you, like, how does it near death go about shaping people? Because I haven't had a near death experience. I've had a spiritual emergency, a spiritual awakening, and Akashic remembering, however you like to identify with it. And because of that experience alone is why I'm in the work that I do now. Had that experience not happened to me, I would have never got back behind a microphone or even learned how to start my business in the beginning. And I assume that's the same with you. I know you were reading spiritual books before you had your experience, but because you had this direct experience with this mystical energy, we should say, I think it catapulted you and propelled to not only find someone that might have experienced it like you, but also giving a voice to people who feel like they really can't share that story with anybody.
Right. Yeah, it becomes like a mission, a self-imposed mission. In my case, I did not hear a voice telling me you have to do this. Other people do. You have to tell the world that death does not exist. I simply said, look, it is my passion. And if I can serve God, the universe, humanity, whatever you want to call it, by doing this, then I'll do it. And it's mostly, you could say it's like a hobby, because I make a living. I actually make a living helping people publish their books. I'm a writing coach, and I am also an editor for independent publishers. But so I have to work. But and my YouTube channel, my books don't give me. My YouTube channel doesn't hardly make anything, and the books I don't make that much either. So I cannot make a living with it. That's what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel that it is like a mission, a self-imposed mission.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy it, and I feel that I am helping with this universal movement of spiritual awakening that's taking place today in the world. And maybe we can help the younger generations uh, awaken, because what I've noticed is that um, the young generations are not that interested in these topics.
Mm-mm.
And like you said, most people who have never had a mystical experience, they are they aren't interested in these topics either. So it's really, I think that everybody is where they need to be. Most people are in a different level. Yeah, they think about God, but they are more worried about other things. And we, people who are maybe watching this, or you, and people like me who are interested in these topics, we are like the black sheep, you know?
I call them the rainbow sheep.
Okay, yeah, but Jesus talked that said that he came to this world to help the black sheep, because the sheep that are already following the herd, or they are okay. But the black sheep, the ones that get lost because they want to investigate or they want to find something new, and they don't follow the crowd,
Mm-hmm.
we are the ones that receive spiritual help more than the others. The others basically don't need it. They have a normal life. They follow the crowd. Out of 100 people, maybe one had a spiritual experience. But that person who has a spiritual experience will only find confusion in the beginning. Why? Because he will try to find an explanation within his own church or within his own religion. And in order to acquire a holistic vision, you need to go beyond religions and find the field of spirituality, which is somewhat different. And you need to start turning your eyes within and trying to get that direct experience with the spiritual world that is not offered by common religions, which are based on I don't know, sacrifices and offerings and ceremonies.
Mm-hmm.
These are more like ceremonial religions. Most religions are. You have to go through this ceremony, and they can call it whatever, and they think once the ceremony is over, they go on with their lives. But someone who has had a mystical experience cannot go on with his or her life.
Not the way they were living before it happened.
So they are forced to start seeking, investigating, comparing, and talking to other people. And it's taken me years. Ever since I was a teenager, I've been on this path, and I still don't feel that I've reached the goal. You see, it's kind of hard, but uh, at least I have something to share for
Mhm.
those who are in the beginning stages.
Well, I think there are different roles that people play. I know you said self-imposed mission, and I really like that because I definitely feel like that's how it started when these ideas were put in my head and put in my heart. But I also think how important it is when you realize that you can leave something past your incarnation. That is when my creativity started to explode, and I really wanted to share because I wasn't sharing for a moment and for a profit and for a praise. I was sharing for the future, and I realized that I had foresight in what was going on. And it definitely made me feel crazy in the present moment of trying to get everything going. But my pride and joy is knowing that this will be here long past this incarnation of Cheyenne. And if there is someone like me out there that goes through that spiritual experience, I want to document the details, whether how light or dark they are for them. So if they go through it, they can always realize like they're not alone. There was someone who experienced this before me. And if for some reason they feel that separation from God that we all feel when we come in, that I hope that they know that they're on the track to find it back. Because what I was doing before, even though it led me up to the life that I have, I felt like there was a certain point I was supposed to go to. And then it was like, okay, take a hard left, kid, and, get back on I-95 because you're not going the way you're supposed to. And that's another thing that NDEs have also said is when they went up and they did a life review so far, they showed them that they still haven't found what they're supposed to be doing with their life. They're still off the path of what we agreed on, referring to soul contracts for anybody that's new to this information. And I just think it's really powerful to know we're not alone. People like you out in the world doing your YouTube channel and writing all of your books and getting that knowledge out there. I'm super appreciative because I'm one of those people that came into your work looking to learn about these topics. And had you not had this mission that you decided was your own beautiful blossoming burden to carry, we wouldn't be talking today. So God definitely works in mysterious ways. And for anybody listening, I highly recommend his new book, Stairway to Heaven, 25 near-death experiences about encounters with God, Jesus, and paradise, because I've only paraphrased a few of them and I can't wait to finish the book. I even started back in on your YouTube channel this morning and I saw you uploaded a video within the last 24 hours about a woman who got to go check out like a spiritualist school in Brazil. And the comparison she had with the people that were born in places where their gifts were not allowed to be nurtured, I thought it was really amazing that there was a safe space for these people to be able to really explore their gifts in an environment where they obviously wouldn't be repressed or turned against them in a way. Because I know that there are people that never really figure out what they're doing. They just kind of go with the motions. And I think they're missing out on a true God-given gift. And I fight for just what I'm doing as far as my project around every other crazy thing in my life. But I know when I sit at my desk and I talk with people like you, that I'm definitely doing something that I love and I want to do, and it's going to outlast me.
Yeah, great. Well, I love your videos. I've been watching them too, and I subscribe to your channel, and people should subscribe to your channel also because you touch different spiritual topics, and you have interviewed a lot of interesting people. And I want to congratulate you because although the channel is more or less new, it has touched really significant topics. I really enjoy it.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me, and it was a pleasure.
You are welcome back anytime. You publish 20 more books and you bring them all on here, and I'll be happy to read them and discuss them with you. For all my friends listening, please check out AJ Parr's YouTube. It's going to be AJ Parr, Spiritual Journalist, NDE. I will put all that information in the link below. And AJ, thank you again. You hang on just a second. I'm going to play some music for our friends while we get out of here.
Okay.
Here's a little bit of Goose Live. This is from a show in Kansas City.